You're listening to the Mike on the Right podcast.
Hello there, and welcome to the Mike on the Right show. I am your host, your favorite conservative podcaster, Mike Neal. This is episode 16, August 18, 2025. And yes, we are broadcasting from the heart of the heartland in central Indiana, the crossroads of America, the great Hoosier State. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your support. I need you to like and share and subscribe, follow, give 5-star ratings anywhere you hear this podcast, whether it's video or audio. I need your help. You are the ones that make this work. I can't do it without you. Thank you so very much. We got a lot to get to today. This is a single issue show, but I've got a couple things I want to talk about on the front end really quick before we get to the issue of the day. TikTok, some of you have been hearing, whether it's been in person or whether you heard it on the show, just the woes that I've been having trying to open this show up to TikTok. It is the Mos Eisley spaceport in Star Wars. It is a terrible place. But I've been trying to post content there and build it, and I'm starting to build a following. I've got several hundred followers there that started from scratch, from zero. Not quite at the beginning of this process, but as I kind of figured out what I wanted to do. And man, every time I post a clip from the show, which is supposed to then drive people to the larger show, it just explodes. And not every single one, but it explodes and blows up and just the violence. Now, there's also a core group of support and supporters, and I'm starting to find people who are like-minded, but there's just a bunch of folks that are just looking for an argument. And they always devolve into an argument about something that is unrelated to the topic. For instance, I posted about compassion in immigration and from last week's episode, and I had kind of this core. Obviously, all of the issues that I stand for kind of come from a faith perspective, but these folks were then attacking Christianity and the foundations of this nation and how there are no signs at all of Judeo-Christian values in America's founding, and they just cherry pick these quotes or cherry pick this scripture. It's just terrible. It almost makes me not want to be there. But what it's done for me, and especially getting out of church, from over the weekend, it's just always like, man, I don't always respond the best either, and so I'm working on that. But I still feel called to discuss issues of the day from a Christian conservative lens, and I of course need to do better in my responses. I try to do video responses because it's a great way to have conversations, it's a great way to drive engagement. But man, if you're on TikTok, go follow me there. Help me out. You don't have to get in the trenches and argue with me. Just, give me a like, give me a share, whatever it is, and I'm going to continue to try to do better on responses. Also want to give you a quick update as to some of the discussions we've had from the past episode. That was obviously just kind of blowing off some steam, but redistricting in America. We've talked about Texas and California and Indiana. Texas is obviously on hold. I think their state Senate passed the maps that they are drawing, waiting for Democrats to get back into Texas on the House side so they can get quorum to do what it is they're going to do. I'm not sure what kind of deal they're creating, but there's something going on there. California, the ones who are trying to hold the moral high ground on the matter, are going to bypass the independent commission that they've had since 2010, and they're going to try to just say, screw you, independent commission that we created 15 years ago. We're going to draw the maps, and then we'll give it back, the power back to you in 2030 at the next census, which is total crap. That's not moral high ground. That's terrible. But this law that they're passing to allow the legislature to gerrymander the districts would only take place if Texas, there'd be like a trigger. But they have to, California not only can pass it to the legislature, they have to get a referendum on the ballot to get people to allow them to do that for the next election. And it seems to me there's a lot of polling out there that says California is not going to be able to get that done. A lot of people like the independent commission. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm against independent commissions because 99% of the time, the people who are appointing people on there are just appointing the same partisan hacks that have probably been helping draw those maps for you. Right? There's this citizens drawing, but really, it's you can't just put anybody on there, right? People got to have knowledge of how this stuff works. And so but they're trying to, for this short a time, take the power away from the independent commission in California to give it to Texas. And I'm not saying that Texas is right. in doing what they're doing. But what I am saying is that California is definitely wrong by saying, you can't do this. This is a stealing of democracy, and you can't do this kind of thing. And then they do it anyway with them alongside Texas, makes them just as wrong and just as bad. And really lying about their moral superiority. And then, of course, in Indiana, obviously this fight has come home, and legislative leaders have been invited to the White House to discuss this further. Not sure where it's headed and going. Several state representatives, even on the Republican side, and state senators have said, we don't like this. Be interested to see if people kowtow to what the White House wants, or if Indiana's going to stand up to them. We'll see, and I'm sure we're going to discuss it here on this show. But what I want to get into today is something completely and totally different, but it is a relevant topic today. Today, I want to talk to you about making the case for school choice in America. And this future is one that includes private school, religious-based schools, charter schools, homeschool, and yes, public schools, and micro schools, and virtual schools, and all the different types of education in America today, with a group of people who are trying to make education not a one-size-fits-all scenario, which is what we've had for decades. We're going to talk about what's good in public schools, what's bad in public schools, what's good in the private school area, and we're going to talk about the law, we're going to talk about data, and we're going to talk about facts. And I want you to approach this just like with me, with an open mind. I'm mostly a product of public school. There were a couple years where I went to private school, but the majority of my time in education was in public school. I had fairly good public schools. We live in an area that has really good public schools for my kids one day when they do go to schools. There's that option and opportunity if we choose to go with it. But the issue is that if education is required and it's needed for life, for a student, for them to progress in life, the money should follow the student. Now hear me out. That's not an attack on private schools, but it's not an attack on public schools, but number one, my position is that we should be funding the student what's best for them, not what's best for a teachers union, not what's best for a local school district, not even what's best for a teacher, though we need to support teachers well better than we are today. But number one has to be essentially the constituent or the product, and that is the child. And how do we do that? We're going to talk about that today. So, big idea. You've heard this quote before. Let's fund students and not systems. Let's trust parents and not bureaucracies. Morally and practically best positioned. Parents are morally and practically best positioned to choose the right school for their child. More money in the current system hasn't produced the same types of educational gains. Throwing money, and I'm going to get into the data in a second, throwing money at kids in school systems is not always what works. We keep trying to say we're going to give this money to public schools. We have to give more. We have to give more. And I'm not saying that there can't be more funding, but there also has to be a change in the core operation of schools to give teachers better support. But also, public schools shouldn't be shielded from competition, which competition, especially in the economy in America, makes everything better. But the money has not equated to better outcomes. In fact, outcomes are flat to down in many places as spending hits record highs. Education is a parental responsibility. Government should enable choices, not monopolize them. And it is for government, if a government's going to provide a service, and then there are other services that are not government related, then if government wants to make the case that you need to go to a public school, then you need to show why the public school is better than the other choices for that student. We've tried system funding first for 50 years, and it is time to try student funding first everywhere. Let's talk about why. Here's a brief history. Spending is up and results are not keeping pace. Since the 1970s, per pupil spending in public schools has risen dramatically with the most largest portion of that, the largest annual jump in the past 20 years. Now, some of this data I'm looking at is from 2022, 2023. Obviously, some of the 24 data is still coming out and things like that. Yet long-term achievement trends are mostly flat and have even declined even after 2020. Now, understand too that the pandemic kind of weighs some of that data, because we went to this forced e-learning when students weren't ready for it, and it actually has hurt a generation of students. They're a little bit behind, and we're just now catching up. And Indiana just made a great announcement on third grade reading, has bursted forth, and it's wonderful. But there's a lot of places where not only has the system failed, but also how we reacted to COVID failed the student. And in 2022 and 2023, the NAEP's long-term trend that 9 and 13-year-old reading and math fell, even versus 2020, which is staggering to me. But that shows you that especially, let's just talk about COVID, not just prior to that, but let's talk about how COVID destroyed a portion of educational attainment for kids. Now listen, money matters. We need money to do anything and everything in the world today, but the way we spend it matters more than the total. And here's what school choice means. When I talk about school choice, this isn't anti-public school, but it's a toolbox where there is a public offering, and there are vouchers, and there are tax credit scholarships, and there are education savings accounts, or ESAs, and there's open enrollment, and there's, public charter schools, and there's the opportunity for private school. Now, homeschoolers will tell you, and I agree, well, they're their own thing. Well, they are really school choice, right? That's a choice, but they're not funded by government, which means they don't have some of those strings attached, and I fully support that. The goal here, overall, especially if you use government dollars for school, is that attach the dollar to the child so families pick the setting, the public, the charter, the religious, the private, that best fits their student and the type of learning. Again, I am not a learner who just, like you can't just give me a document, let's say, I'm not someone who just reads something and just completely understands. Not that I don't have reading comprehension. I'm sure that'll be used against me. But show me how to do something. Show me how something works, and then that's how I learn. And there are students who can read, there are students who can learn like that, there are students who can listen. And some students are geared towards different and better subjects. And how do we build that foundation? Of course, there has to be kind of a foundation of general education, but after that, we should be doing what's best for students and teaching to their way of learning and teaching to the things that they're good at or interested in, and not force things upon them. And don't even get me started about the recorder and hot cross buns. Here's the evidence. Choice and charter performance is up across America. There was a 2023 study from Stanford that shows that this multi-state study found that charter students showed the strongest learning growth that has ever been observed, especially large gains in high-quality charter networks. Results often translate to weeks of extra learning per year because of the way they've changed the programming. And in fact, it kind of shows that there's been almost 23 days of extra learning per year. And in 4 years, up to 40. So kids are going the same amount of time as regular schools, but they're getting, just because of the way the learning has been tailored, they're getting more information and more education in the same amount of time. The Urban Institute also studies statewide programs like the Florida tax credit, showing that higher college enrollment and in some cases graduation for participants are often strongest from lower income and minority students have gone through a choice program, who have gotten out of their situation. Now again, don't get me wrong. Some public schools are in communities that are having economic strife, and they're having cultural strife, and they're having a crisis in the family. And that doesn't help. None of these pieces being fixed on their own, just singularly, fix the whole thing. All of these things, culture and family and school and education, all those things need to be fixed and changed. But some of these schools are in areas that don't have that type of change happening right now. And so some of these students, according to these studies, the students in low-income and minority areas who get an opportunity to go to a school that's not the government school that's really their only choice in some places and states. Do better. That's it right there, right? We want students to have an opportunity. That's how you create real equity. It's not by forcing it. Again, equal opportunity, not equal outcome. But you can raise the prospect of better opportunity with better suited learning. And again, there are great public schools. There are some wonderful teachers and wonderful schools. We live in an area that has great schools. There are some rural schools that are great. There are schools across the nation that are fantastic. And then there are some that are struggling. But we have to say here that we're not here to just fund a school because it exists, a public school. And that's why that money should follow a kid. If your public school is great, then choice should protect it. If it's not, then it's the child who is forced to be there because, well, it's the public school and we have to support it and we can't support anything else. If education is required in America, then the money should follow the student. No matter where they go, public, private, charter, religious, what have you. And here's another reason why some public schools suffer. And actually, it's across America. It is because there are far too many non-teaching roles in public schools than there used to be. In fact, now, here's some numbers from 2022, that only 47.5% of staff, this is an average, at public schools in America are teachers. That means that 52.5% nationally are non-teachers. Why? If that's like going to Midas and having more people who aren't mechanics than are mechanics. Your bread and your butter is fixing cars. Yet, you have more administrative staff and more social media marketers and more accountants than you have as the foundation of your business. That is the same thing here. Teachers should be 75% of a school district. There doesn't need to be as much administration. There needs to be some. There needs to be some media specialists. There needs to be some of the other positions. But this has gone out of hand, and we are funding so many people that are not contributing to the education of a child. And that's the school district's fault. This is not the state's fault. It's not Indiana's. It's not Massachusetts. It's not Michigan. It's not Kansas. That is your local school board. And if you want to change it, and here's why you should change it. But if you want to change it, first, go run people for school board who are going to change it. Or go tell them, go testify to these school boards what this is doing. This is my elixir. There's a lot of things that need to change in education, so this is not the only fix that's needed. But if a school district today would reduce the amount of non-teaching staff, if they would outsource some things that they need, if maybe it's accounting or I don't know, they can use part of that money that they save to pay teachers more and maybe even hire some more teachers. And then the rest of it that they don't give to teachers is then reduced spending, which means you don't have to have all these referendums. You don't have to beg. You don't have to do all these things. It's simple. It's simple economics. And public schools in America can run so much better if they simply kept eyes on the... It's not about the teachers union. It's not about what they want. I'm not saying don't equip teachers. I'm not saying don't let teachers teach. But they need to teach without indoctrination. They need to teach to the material. And they need to teach in a way that students can grow and learn and understand. And again, if a student can't learn from that environment, then they need to be able to find another place. And certainly, there are those with means that cannot take a voucher or not take an ESA or not take a whatever and send their kid to private school. But there's a group of people in America that can't. So why shouldn't the money follow the student? Why should we set them up for failure in a system that doesn't serve them? Why is that okay? The money is ours. We're the taxpayer. So no, it shouldn't just go to fund public schools. It should go to fund public schools, but it should also go to, again, not fund the system, fund the student. And through the student, the system is funded. But get rid of all this overstaffing of non-teaching positions, and I think there will be a paradigm shift and a change. And then you can pay teachers more. The median teacher salary in America is $70,000 nationally. Now, what that gets thrown off by is the cost of living in New York and in California and in Massachusetts and in wherever, right? Maybe in the state of Washington. So, of course, you got to pay them more there because they can't afford to live. So the numbers are never going to be exact and equal. People manipulate that data to say, well, teachers make so much less in Indiana, and that's because California is blue and liberal, and they love to pay teachers more. No, per capita on the whole, they don't. They don't. It's not that much of a difference because of the cost of living and how much further your dollar stretches. But across America, we should absolutely be paying teachers more. And no teacher in any school should be paying out of their pocket for crayons and for paper and for, I saw one teacher that was having to buy chairs for their classroom. No. Get rid of some of these administrative positions and put that money back in the classroom. Cut the bureaucracy, boost the teacher, but first boost the chances of a student becoming successful by giving them choice. Public, private, religious, charter, microschool, homeschool, all of it. What is best for the student, not the system? Let's look for a moment at what Indiana has done. Indiana, for the first time in this last legislative session, in Indiana's Choice Scholarship Program, or its voucher program, has expanded it to all students. There's no longer an income cap. There's no longer any of that. If the school accepts vouchers, you can get a voucher. And vouchers in Indiana are designed to cover up to, depending on situations, 90% of the state's pure pupil funding that is needed, up to a cap. And that money follows students to the school that is best for them, including enrollment in public schools. Indiana has led by trusting parents because it is the parents' responsibility to ensure education. It is not government's responsibility. Government can be a partner in that if they have public schools available and that school fits what the child's need is, but it is not government's responsibility. It is the parents' responsibility. And this is a model for the nation. So let's support that. Again, that could be a public school. I'm not anti-public school. We shouldn't be anti-public school. But school choice should reign in America, and Indiana is leading the way. And we have an ESA, an education scholarship program, where there's a pot of money that again, follows the kid, controlled by the parent. And there's a huge, it's different than the voucher program because it's pure money. It's in an account. You have $10,000 per student. And if you don't use it, then it reverts back. Or I think you can keep some of it in the account, like maybe $1,000 rolls over, but the rest of it then reverts back to state's general fund. Arizona is huge on ESAs. And then Indiana has also started a CSA, or a career scholarship program, or a career scholarship account, and that money is for vocational education. If you're in rural Indiana and there's no vocation school, but there's a diesel mechanic down the road, well, we can pay a little bit of money to the diesel mechanic to teach you about diesel mechanics, if that's what you want to do. Or we can help with electrical apprenticeship programs, or we can help with any of those things in the city and in rural Indiana. These are creating options for students in a time when we are funding school. We're fighting about funding schools instead of funding students. Choice does not drain public schools, but it does cause them to have to compete. And for too long, Public schools have been immune from competition. And competition is what breeds excellence. When you don't have to compete, that's why in utilities, you don't get to choose your electric company. If you've got Duke Electric or you've got AES here in Indiana or you've got PG&E, out in California or wherever, you don't get a choice, right? So that's a monopoly. We're anti-monopoly in America. So then we create artificial competition through government agencies that control the price of your electric or your natural gas or your water or whatever. And if they're not controlling it, then there's government votes on that. If you have like a local water utility, then the city gets to vote on those increases. But there's a public accountability system that creates artificial competition or creates competition in that. The same thing with education. If you're, I live in, Cicero, Indiana, so I have to go to Cicero's schools. Or I live in Middlebury, Indiana, so I got to go to the Middlebury school system. Well, it's a good school system, but it doesn't teach my child in a way in which he or she can understand or what's best for them or what have you. But no, you're stuck. No, school choice creates that competition for schools to be better on the public side, but also for private schools to be funded when education is required because the student brings the funding, which then funds the system. The system shouldn't be funded first. The student should be funded first. Parents know best, and we need to continue to give them the opportunity to lead. So in closing, public, private, charter, micro school, all of it, homeschool, we need to have options for what's best for students. Money keeps rising in education, but the results are not keeping pace. That's a stewardship problem, not a student problem. Some public schools are fantastic. Let them thrive. Let's support them. Let's pay more teachers, more money, and get rid of non-teaching positions. But we need as many models as possible to allow students to flourish, not to fail them. Parents know best for their children, and it is their responsibility, nobody else's, to educate them. That doesn't mean there aren't partners in public schools and private schools and what have you, but it is the parent's responsibility first. Fund students, not systems. A child's future shouldn't depend on a zip code or a bureaucracy. It should depend on a parent's choice of a school that fits best, but ultimately what is best for our children. And that's how we build a better America. Folks, thank you so much for listening today. Thank you for your support. Again, if you can like, share, follow, subscribe, 5-star ratings, wherever you are, wherever you listen, you're the ones that make this work. I hope that you found this informative. I hope that you found this educating, and to use a dad pun. I believe in this wholeheartedly. I believe in this for my kids and for yours. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great